All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we are back with our next video lecture. I know some of you can't hold your applause, but we are going to spend this last kind of column, at least on the flowchart, reviewing the first four presidents and then moving ahead to the next four. So here's a quick review of something or things you should already know, and you're going to fill in your blank president's chart as you go. I know, but that president's chart's going to serve as your notes, so take notes as you need it. Most of this stuff's already in Cornell notes or worksheets or something that you've already filled out, so you could always look back at that or in the book. We're going just president at a time, so we start with president number one. It should not be shocking that that is George Washington, and there are the years he serves, 2 terms, 1789 to 1797. His vice president, who ran against him knowing he was going to lose and he received no electoral votes, was John Adams. And of course, just like your teacher, he has no political party. He actually believed that those would destroy America, which was, hey, pretty good thinking looking at today's government. Key event-wise, if you look, his big key events are coming up. He has the Whiskey Rebellion, or at least he's the president in charge of the Whiskey Rebellion, or that one, president in command when that takes place, which when they put the excise tax on whiskey to pay for the whiskey they were trading, the farmers threw up in arms, grabbed their weapons, and now you have crazy colonists on the frontier that used to be soldiers grabbing their guns, and they have whiskey. That usually ends up being bad. So Washington, in this case, is the first and only time in American history where the actual president, acting as commander-in-chief, leads his soldiers almost into battle, and he leads his new army to put down his old army and their rebellion. Next is the Proclamation of Neutrality. This is something that Washington sticks with and John Adams tries to keep as well. This is a precedent, actually, that he sets up, and that it's that we are going to remain neutral and not fight or be part of the war between Britain and France. Both countries wanted us to be part with them. We actually had the Treaty of Alliance with the French. We just didn't keep that. The British wanted us on their side because we are trading partners with them. This is our first big national statement as a country saying that we will be neutral. And hopefully right now you're thinking to yourself, why would we be neutral? What would the positive of that be? That's because it saved us money. And of course we were in a giant amount of debt. All right, moving on to the first cabinet. Again, another precedent that this president puts into place. He sets up a group of advisors for him, basically. And it's 5 of them. He has Thomas Jefferson, who is the Secretary of State, Alexander Hamilton, who is the Secretary of Finance, or the Secretary of, I can't think of it. Moving on, we have Henry Knox, who's the Artillery General in the war, and now he becomes the Secretary of War or Defense. Edmund Randolph is the Attorney General. Samuel Osgood is actually the Postmaster General. So there are the 5 people that will advise President Washington because he was unsure of himself as a leader. Next, you have the Treaty of Greenville taking place right here in beautiful Ohio. And you have the Native Americans led by Little Turtle fighting on the border of Ohio and Indiana. And you have a guy named Little Turtle and one of his warriors, Blue Jacket, versus our commanding officer for the Americans, Mad Anthony Wayne. And the Americans defeat the Indians at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. And in that, or because of that, the Indians sign a treaty giving away Ohio to the Americans. So it is American land. The Indians are just living here. But since the Indians are different than Britain, who we won the land from, we have to go back now and either fight or take the land from them through peaceful treaties, or in this case, actually violence or going to war. Moving on, again, when Washington leaves, he puts out that farewell address, warning of different things. And moving on to the second president. But again, Washington serves 2 terms and he retires. He could have served more. He could have kept running, but he decided to pull away being president. President number 2 is John Adams. He serves 1 term. His vice president is Thomas Jefferson. The big thing here, there should be a giant thing that you recognize when you look at this. And that's that both of these men come from different political parties. You have a Federalist and a Democratic Republican, which changes after this event. So you have the key event of the XYZ affair, which is where we go to France to try to offer money to them to appease them for not being or staying neutral and for not joining them in the war, and they demand a bribe. So when our people come back from France, the hatred of the French rises, and Americans want to go to war with the French, and they call this the XYZ affair. The Alien and Sedition Acts are next. They were set up against, they were passed by a federal Congress, repealed later by the Democratic Republicans, but they were passed basically in order to kick out any illegal alien in a way, or any person that's outside of our country or not a purebred American. It was basically going against anybody that could talk bad about the government, anybody, good or bad by the way, which was unconstitutional. They were also different other things, saying that if our country went to war with France, we could kick out any French citizens for that reason or put them in jail. So the Alien and Sedition Acts were later repealed. We have the decline of the Federalist Party. John Adams is president. He's an unpopular president. Things that are taking place at the time are unpopular to the people, and his whole party suffers. So the people of America look at his party and say they're not doing a good job. Let's vote in the other party, which actually gains popularity for the next president. And then last are midnight judges. John Adams puts these presidents in as he's leaving office. So as he knows he hasn't been elected again, and as he's leaving, he appoints the new federal justices up until the last hours of him being president. And this way, at least one of the branches of government, in this case the judicial branch, will be made up of Federalists. All right, moving on to president number 3. All right, you have Thomas Jefferson. There he is, signer and one-time writer of the Declaration of Independence. His vice presidents, he has 2, Aaron Burr and George Clinton down here, no relation to Bill. Now, he is the first Democratic-Republican president we have, and his key events right away is Marbury versus Madison, which is a court case where he did not give up the rights to a judge. Actually, the judge's name is Marbury, William Marbury, and he sues because William Marbury is one of those midnight judges, and he knows that John Adams gave him a job. It's just he never received his contract or his paperwork. Now, the president, Thomas Jefferson, had that paperwork sitting on his desk, and he never delivers it over to William Marbury. So even though he knows Marbury should have the job and it was signed by the old president, he never delivers it. He never has his Secretary of State, James Madison, deliver it, and that's why Madison gets sued. All right, so Marbury sues for his contract, basically. It goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court judges overall on it that the court, even though William Marbury wins, that they believe that Marbury should have his job, the court can't force Thomas Jefferson to give him that job, that would be unconstitutional. They can't overstep their bounds. So it actually sets up the policy of judicial review, and it sets up their power to rule things unconstitutional. So this giant court case sets up the judicial branch's power in separation of powers and checks and balances. All right, Thomas Jefferson also doubles the size of America with this giant purchase of land right there in red called Louisiana. We buy that over from Napoleon for $15 million. We've gone over in class how we tried to negotiate just for down here for New Orleans, but we actually bought this whole section, including New Orleans, for $5 million more than our asking price of $10 million for New Orleans. So Napoleon needs the money. He's at war with the British, but he also wants to set America up to be just as powerful or more than the British. That's one of the biggest reasons he does that. So for Americans, this is great. It is an illegal activity that the president buys the land without asking Congress for money. But again, it's one of those deals where you could not pass up, and we needed to buy it as soon as possible. He then sets up these 2 men, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, in a group called the Corps of Discovery, and it is their job to leave from down here, St. Louis, Missouri, and travel the Louisiana Territory and go up here to Oregon. That's their goal right there, kind of like this. Don't quote me on that exact route, but it's pretty close. So they explored from St. Louis, Missouri, all the way to the Pacific Ocean, using rivers as they could. They were helped by a Shoshone girl named Sacagawea, who kind of goes with them on the tour. And along the way, they're drawing maps, pictures. They're sending back animal life, plant life, anything else they could see, because this area is called the Great Plains. It is low, flat grassland and vastly different than the original colonies and new states over here, which are more wooded and forested. Zebulon Pike also leaves from St. Louis and then travels down here to Colorado. So you have 2 different explorations going on at the same time, discovering this new land or new world for America. We do go to war with Tripoli back then. It's a quick, tiny little war. It's the first time we fight outside our country, and it's a war with a small African nation. But again, it's that idea that America can now go to war outside of our own country and prove that we're getting stronger. So that's a good thing for America. All right, the Embargo Act is the last thing now because of impressing our sailors. The French and the English are impressing them by stealing them and capturing them, and also supplying the Indians with weapons in our land in America. The Americans decide that they are going to stop trade with all foreign countries and close the ports to everywhere. Basically, we're going to do this, or we're going to live our lives on our own without the help of anyone else. Which sometime as 8th grade students, you probably think that to your parents. But if you were to live on your own without their help, life would be probably pretty boring without electronics and anything else, because you don't make any money. Sorry to bring that up, but that's true. So without anybody helping America, again, the economy suffers and goes really bad. So this hurts the idea of the Democratic Republicans, this Embargo Act. It kills the economy back then. And it is not a popular thing for Thomas Jefferson. So he leaves being president with a very bad economic decision. Now when President 4 steps in, James Madison, there he is. By the way, your teacher, Mr. Saint, is actually taller than him. He's our shortest president. He does serve 2 terms, 1809 to 1817, and there is Vice Presidents George Clinton and Elbridge Gerry. And he is another Democratic Republican, which is a popular party back then for the good things that they're doing. First thing he does is he tries to fix the Embargo Act by creating the Non-Intercourse Act, which stops trade with just Britain and France, but opens up America to trade with everyone, which again, this is a very unpopular thing, because it does hurt our government overall. It hurts our economy because Britain and France are our 2 largest trading partners. So even though we're trading, we're not trading with the 2 countries we needed to. Next is the Battle of Tippecanoe. The Indians that were getting supplies and weapons from the British on the Ohio border and fighting the Americans off are basically led by these 2 men. You have Tecumseh and you have the Prophet. There he is, the one-eyed wonder, everybody. If you look at that eye right there, is a sewn or actually soldered shut by a knife. So you have Tecumseh and the Prophet setting up this giant conglomeration or confederation of American Indians that decided they were going to fight against William Henry Harrison, this gentleman, and the American forces. And it goes bad when Tecumseh leaves to go to Florida to try to get more Indian help and more people to the Confederation. And his brother, the Crazy Prophet, or his real name's Tenskwatawa, but his brother actually leads the Indians into war with William Henry Harrison, who knows Tecumseh's gone. So this ruins Tecumseh's idea of a giant Indian confederation, and the Indians will no longer ever work together like this again in one giant group. They'll have smaller groups, but not to the size Tecumseh brought together. All right, last is the War of 1812. It starts again with impressment, with the British helping the Native Americans, an affair or a deal where an American boat was sunk by a British boat called the Chesapeake Leopard Affair. So you have, again, an outside country firing on one of our own boats, which is an act of war. The Warhawks versus the Doves in Congress took place when the Warhawks, the people wanting war, or calling for war, fought against the Doves, who were mostly Federalist in the north. The Warhawks came from the south and the west. The U.S. isn't ready to fight. Our Navy is small. It's only 20 ships big. It's led by old people who were in charge of the Revolutionary War and stuff. And you have the British, who have over 800 warships. They are the biggest, best army in the world. It's kind of like the movie Rocky IV, when we have to fight the Russian guy. And if you haven't seen Rocky IV, why not? Because that movie is actually magical. All right. The U.S. builds up their warship. This actually helps our economy. We borrow boats again. That's called privateers. And the goals of the war, there's one: conquer and take Canada through Detroit and Fort Niagara, which are pictured underneath. One of the key battles is the Battle of Lake Erie, right by where we live, and it's created, or our commanding officer is Oliver Hazard Perry, who builds a fleet of ships in Put-in-Bay Island. And if you go there, there's actually a statue made for him today. Next down here is the Battle of Thames. You actually can't read it because the giant picture of the water got in the way. But the Battle of Thames happens where Tecumseh is killed in battle, and this ends the alliance with the Indians and the British. So William Henry Harrison becomes a hero because he killed Tecumseh, and also the Indians stopped helping the British. Last, you have Washington, D.C. getting burned down by the actual first White House. It was called the Presidential Mansion, was set fire to when they evacuated. Actually, President Madison and his wife evacuated D.C. and helped go around getting people to leave, and they went to Baltimore where they were safer. Dolly Madison, as she's leaving the Presidential Mansion, is grabbing constitutions, grabbing documents, grabbing paintings of George Washington, thinking that would be important to save, which it was, and they're still hanging in the Capitol today. After Washington, D.C., they move on to the Battle of Fort McHenry, or the defense of Baltimore. And here is a picture in the newspaper, or a painting, of what the